Buckle up in the regalia and get your camera because we're reviewing Final Fantasy 15 and Lucky Puppy's journey to platinum the Final Fantasy franchise. Be sure to like and subscribe, and if Final Fantasy 15 is your favorite, type Prompto in the comments below as this beats you towards the kingdom of Lucius. Clawing its way out of development hell, in 2016, Square Enix released this royal mess-up. This royal pain of a platinum asked for at least a 60-hour playthrough, which consists of 80 mind-numbing side quests, slaying a beast so massive that it could fit a whole town in its body, and making a car fly. This game is so stuffy it forced me to ask, who is this game for? But like all great adventures, we start from the beginning with the first trophy that sets the tone in the stage as we meet the boys. Ignis, Prompto, Gladio, and our main character, Noctis. Now, Noctis is a character that looks like a Hot Topic employee that is a brooding pile of too cool to show emotion, even when his boys are helping him get hitched. So technically, this is a bachelor party. How exciting! A chance at our own hangover story with Final Fantasy. Well, you're not getting that, and you're never getting that. Unfortunately, I got some bad news for you. The story is cut up like sashimi from the jump, with 4 DLCs and a stray movie around here somewhere. Papa Square Enix made sure I didn't want to go and understand this story, even after purchasing all the DLC. Rest in peace to whoever bought all that DLC on release. That was expensive. However, the review goes on, and this is what I did understand, is that Noctis Kingdom is going to be overtaken by an empire. To stop this, Noctis has to marry some girl from another kingdom, Luna in this case, so they can join forces and not join the empire. Now that sounds like a simple story, but, well, you know, Square Enix. So the story goes by, and all the while I notice 1 hour goes by, 5 hours goes by, 10 hours goes by, but then combat is not getting any deeper, or harder, or, oops, sorry, it's one button. Oh, wait, dodging is one button too. Yep, that's right. In an effort to go ahead and make the game more accessible to everyone else, they reduced the combat to one button, and for dodging, it's one button held down, as this is the Final Fantasy for first-timers and veterans, and it says that before you even start the game. So now the pieces are starting to click together, like why there are no upgradable items, or weapons, or most of the combat is get in the whip and cruise to the next story beat, or, you know, since I was going for the platinum, next side quest, because there are 80 of those, which bag us some 5 more trophies. The trophies come slowly but surely as I go ahead and try to put the bad combat into the back of my mind so I don't go and fixate on it. I stopped at the Crow's Nest and played a minigame for a trophy, rode a chocobo for another, and just kind of chilled and went through the game and the story to go ahead and get those trophies slowly and naturally. I did this while streaming, so it was actually really enjoyable, but that's a merit really to my chat, as they helped me keep my sanity, because while I was being bullied at twitch.tv/luckypuppy, the background gameplay was Final Fantasy 15. But be warned, if you do this solo, you will need the patience of a saint, as it is very long and tiresome to do some of these quests. Back to the story though. So several chapters later, I hit a boss fight, and I'm really hoping it's gonna turn up the heat. Yeah, no it doesn't. You just turn into Super Saiyan Noctis. You're just flying around holding the attack button, watching crystals fly out all over the place and auto-lock onto them. It's wild and ridiculous. No explanation of where the summons went, or why, or how it plays into the stopping the Empire, or just put aside somewhere. It was after this little conundrum that I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna focus on getting to where Tinja will build, as the world building is just kind of botched at this point, same as the combat. So maybe I could get some payoff for some of the other characters I like Prompto. And he was genuinely my favorite character thus far, until they started making him have a heart-to-heart with the main character. Luckily, at this point, I was almost done with the story. My cruising around was almost over. Ignis had just turned into Stevie Wonder after the politically arranged marriage between Luna and Noctis is put on ice. So the bachelor party turned sour with the bride being stabbed by the bad guy from the Empire, which we trusted earlier on, knowing he was the bad guy. I mean, honestly, who would have thought a guy dressed like an eccentric hobo was not to be trusted? That aside, we unfortunately play through the grieving process, and the voice acting does not help, as the voice acting performance is dry and isn't consistent with how Noctis feels towards in-game events. But hey guys, Noctis is the King of Kings, right? A title bestowed by Square Enix themselves. Under titles aside, we are now at the very back end of the game. Heavy spoilers here. Noctis has now been tricked into touching a shiny geode and ends up trapped inside, and there's a massive time skip. You come back and it looks like someone forgot to go and pay the light bill, because it's dark, dreary, and there are demons all over the place. You find out the bad guy's been ruling the whole time while Noctis was in the rock. So you go to fight the hobo that's surprisingly well dressed and find Ifrit there. Yeah, that made no sense until I played the DLC and looked up a lore video. Yes, I had to look up a lore video to find that the bad guy is actually immortal and can control summons, so the summons dipped into hiding, but he caught and controlled Ifrit. So you go ahead and remind Ifrit that you're the main character, put him in the dirt, and then proceed to go ahead and try to kill Mr. Immortal twice. Once in the physical realm, and then once after he was already dead, you have to like suck up all your ancestors and use their power to kill him again. Yeah, that's the story. A little convoluted, but they got there after like 5 DLCs in a movie. Hey, speaking of finishing Now, when you beat this game, you can play New Game Plus, or continue where you left off. It really helps take the pressure off, as what is the right way to end the game without losing progress, as this is actually something that's very common in Final Fantasy. If you don't end the game correctly, you could brick your save file, or worse, have to create a new save file, which sucks just as bad. Which I'll touch more on the rewards for beating the story in just a moment, because we really need to talk about how, once you see the end credits, you are encouraged to keep playing with new quests and enemies that are far and above the level that the story stops at. Yet even at the end game, the combat going all the way down to one button still had people complain about difficulty. The main character can literally teleport, so I don't know who Square Enix is actually making this game for, the veterans or the noobs. But thank God they were well aware that anyone who actually stuck with the game to the very end might be a little mad that they didn't go and get a full Final Fantasy experience out of this. After all, 60 hours is considered light in the Final Fantasy world. If that was it, and I just had to look at a black screen after 60 hours, I'd be like, you got soft hands, brother. Yeah, luckily they did tuck away a few surprises at the end, like a flying car. Let's go ahead and give Square Enix some credit though. The devs did an open world with questing. It's bare, but it works, and I can bet on release it was passable. Now this Final Fantasy does also have dialogue choices, which aside from previous Final Fantasies, is a new feature. But be ready for the dreaded Fallout 4 dialogue wheel. I got the flying car, which is faster and gives unlimited fuel, but it's on rails. So you get a trophy for obtaining this, which is kind of like a, nice give and take. In fact, oftentimes the world was so vast and empty, I would tell the car to drive itself to the next quest, receive my 10 XP. Yes, 10, you can count those on your little piggies, and be rest assured that it'll take 80,000 XP towards the top end of the levels in Final Fantasy 15. From a long car trip, and talk to someone else and return to the car. Rinse and repeat. And sometimes, if I was real lucky, it would even let me go and skip the ride back. That was the good times. But after seeing all these changes and all this gameplay, it really did make me sad, because I really had to wonder what happened, because Final Fantasy Lightning Returns, the previous mainline Final Fantasy, that many would consider a spinoff, had an open world with multiple cities, more varied quests, different biomes, and dungeons. What happened? Well, the short version is that Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to be part of the Final Fantasy 13 story, being called Versus 13. It was supposed to go on and tell a darker, edgier, and more adult storyline that had blood, betrayal, and a whole lot more. But unfortunately, Square Enix canceled it. They got cold feet watching how 14 was struggling, bills began to pile, and development hell was certainly a thing for this game, as it was technically just leftover assets from Final Fantasy 13. In fact, they were going to go and name this multiverse Nova Chrysalia. This name alone is pretty much like the one who shall not be named to Square Enix. They refused to acknowledge it even exists, just like Bloodborne 2 and Sony. I did notice a pattern though while I was playing. I figured out you can't really lose or break your save. Turns out if you have enough high potions and elixirs and phoenix downs, you can beat anyone, as combat and levels don't matter either. Now unfortunately, all this together was putting a sour taste in my mouth. We have combat that's so easy it has no stakes. We have a skill upgrade system that just makes this worse. And then on top of this open, empty world that seems to waste these fluid and good-looking animations of the combat. I did feel really challenged and had fun during the combat training though. When all three guys would try to jump me, I was able to use all the abilities and felt good resistance from the system. But this was around level 40-ish, or the end of the game pretty much. Other than that, most of the combat was easy, and the hardest part was getting the camera to work with me. I noticed all of this towards the end of the game. Most of the stuff had already been done, and that just left the extra activities of the game to go and complete, as the bulk of the story and the bulk of the side content was already done, and a bit of a letdown to be honest. But hey, we got a whopping 35 trophies from the story, which leaves us with 15 excluding the plat itself. A few trophies I was missing that I really had to lock in for was maxing all the skills of all the lads and defeating an adamantoids and a couple others. I ended up leveling each of the guys' skills to max. I used a rubber band for Gladio, yes, a actual rubber band, walking in circles to max his hiking skill, spam cooking the cursed sushi for Ignis, and thank God I got the perk for Prompto early to take photos so he could take as many as he could. Fishing was a decent minigame, but it's certainly not worth playing the whole game over for. Now, to touch back on how beating the game gives you even more powerful weapons. The Lushi ring, or as I like to call it, the Suck ring, which is fun, and I did actually find a way to use it in the Adamantoids boss fight. For the final trophy, since he was double my level, I just spammed the Suck ring until he was sucked away, or until he was slowly but surely withered into the small little husk that everyone else became before they popped out of existence. Which, may I say, this game does a terrific job of showing you how colossal a Adamantoids is, with it being level 99. The story only asks you to be like level 41 to beat the game. For reference, it actually looks like a giant mountain is moving in the background. And only once you get closer do you realize that's actually the boss you're going to fight. Another bright side of this game is actually the lighting, which was really good and consistent even in dark dungeons and bright desert. It especially helps that there are little to no bugs. Overall though, this is a journey I think I might actually forget though, and I'm glad I got the game on steep discount. I would recommend this game for first time gamers and small children. There's little to no difficulty here. The story can be sidestepped so you can focus on getting through the game. God forbid the person is that bad, but if I gave this to a Final Fantasy veteran, they may just ask me to sell it for them. However, the game does work, and at no point did I feel that it was technically compromised, and it was a visual treat for the eyes. Sadly, this game gets a 4 out of 10 noodles. I hate to rate it so low, especially off the heels of Final Fantasy 13 Trilogy review. Link's on screen, but even as a game without the Final Fantasy tag on it, it's not good. Not terrible, but certainly not good. If this is what got you into Final Fantasy, I'm happy you're here, truly, but you've graduated, man. Go play 12, 10, or if you're a real no-life, 14, and celebrate how far you've come. Thank you so much for watching me get the Final Fantasy 15 Platinum, and remember to like and subscribe. If you enjoyed this video and you can't get enough of Final Fantasy, check out my other Final Fantasy reviews as the journey continues. I also stream on twitch.tv/luckypuppy, and my Discord is on screen and in description. Can't wait to see you guys there, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, my lucky frogs.